So the second season of Foundation has just concluded, and it's safe to say that it went out with the best episode that we've ever had in the show. With there being multiple deaths and the direction of the future changing slightly following what happened to Salvor, I thought I'd take a look at all that was out there along with giving my theories and predictions on what I think could happen next. So let's get into it. Here is Foundation Season 3 Everything We Know. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The release date. The main question that's on all of our minds is there going to be another season of the show? The story of Season 2 concluded in a way that most certainly alluded to the fact that it was far from over, which is good. In terms of Apple voicing their decision on if it's been greenlit or not, that's something that's currently unknown. There's been no official statement on if the show will be returning. However, there are rumours out there which state that they were seen filming parts of Season 3 prior to the Writers Guild and Actors Guild going on strike earlier this year. So that's a positive sign, meaning that Apple could have greenlit the show in-house, but it's just not been announced to the public yet. Apple will most likely be looking at viewing figures, the completion rate of the show, how many people started it and ultimately finished it, and if the show managed to transcend the medium that it was on, something which has become a large factor in the renewal of TV shows in the modern day. Personally, this is one of Apple's best shows and it's one of the best pieces of sci-fi television that I've seen in a long while, so I would predict that it will be returning to our screens. If we look at when it could return to the screens, usually it would tend to take around a year for the show to be written, go into production, the post-production, and then market the release. However, with the strikes that are in place at the moment and it not really looking like much development has been made, we're at the mercy of the studios for when they decide to agree to a fair deal with the unions. So it's very unpredictable when we could see the show again. If things get ironed out by the end of the year and if we take into consideration that some filming has already been done for Season 3, I would predict that we may be fortunate enough to get it at the end of 2024, so it's looking like there will be a long wait. Theories on the story. It's no secret that the second season of Foundation deviated from the book slightly, but what it managed to do was stay in line with it to a certain degree and still be respectful to the source material. It's probably best to split this section by the three main arcs that will most likely be occurring in the new season. The Cryonic Dynasty. The major revelation that we had in this season of the show was that Demerzel was essentially trapped and was made to ensure that the Cryonic Dynasty continued on from when Cleon I originally founded it. That was her sole purpose. With the programming that she had inside of her, which was altered by Cleon, we found out that she was just as trapped in the present day as what she was when she was taken apart and stored in the chamber for thousands of years. Despite being able to roam around Trantor, if she ever tried to drift from what she was programmed to do, it would kick in and make sure that she felt, thought, and acted as was intended. As the season went on, we saw more of an emotional side to Demerzel, something which really allowed the character to shine and meant that she became more likable from a viewer's perspective. We could sympathize with her, and we understood that she didn't want to be there doing what she had to do. With her having the Prime Radiant, it opens up a lot of possibilities for what her purpose could mean moving forward. The final line that she said was that she could already see that wonderful things lied ahead. Whilst this could be about the Cryonic Dynasty and the preservation of it, I don't think that's the case. She was programmed to decant some new versions, and she'll always do that as she always has, but when referring to wonderful things, I think she can see a future which is different, where maybe she isn't a slave to the programming which Cleon I set up. There was a moment where Seldon looked at her in episode 9 and said to her, "The future is invented every second, invent a better one," almost implying that he knew full well the power that Demerzel was capable of. So I think there will be something which means that the Cryonic Dynasty will fall to its knees, and she'll be able to eventually break free from the programming that's within her, allowing her to invent a better future. She doesn't care for the dynasty, she cared for Cleon and she cares for day, dusk and dawn, but inside, if the dynasty crumbled, it wouldn't matter to her. Gaal, Seldon and the Mule. This is something which I think will be the main arm of the story in Season 3 of the show, and it will ultimately end up tying into what ends up happening on Trantor as the two timelines will hopefully collide. We saw that Gaal and Seldon ended up going into Cryosleep on Ignis following Salvor being killed. They wanted to make sure that they woke up in 152 years' time, which is the time period of where Gaal had the vision of seeing the Mule and the devastation that he caused. Right at the end of the final episode, we saw that Gaal had made it to that timeline due to the fact that we cut to 152 years later and the Mule could sense her presence. Let's remember, He's a mentalic, and a strong one at that, so he will know. It seems as though the Mule is going to be destroying everything in his path in order to find Gaal with the hopes of taking her out. This is where I feel we could end up seeing the Mule destroying the Cleonic dynasty that's on Trantor and wiping it out. The Mule is said to be an extremely powerful individual, so one would imagine that he could take Trantor quite easily. At least, I feel like he could. This is where it could tie into Demerzel, and maybe he could rid her of the suffering that she has. When it comes to the identity of the Mule, it's one that's out there for guessing, but I quite like the idea of Sareth and Dawn's son being the Mule. This could also tie into why he would want to destroy the Galactic Empire, because he may feel that he's the rightful heir to it, and that could also be motivation as to why he wants to destroy the Second Foundation, because he wants to be the Supreme Leader. I think we'll see Gaal and Harry have that fateful battle with the Mule, but I don't think it will be something that necessarily occurs in the next season of the show. I think the showrunners have almost set the Mule to be like Thanos, a main boss and an endgame, so it could take time for them to eventually end up meeting. The Vault. The story of the Vault is an interesting one, because now we've seen the true power of the Vault and the fact that it can essentially hold the population of a planet within it. With this version of Harry Seldon being more in the dark than the other one that's on Ignis, I do hope that we'll see their paths cross as time goes on. The line, "Terminus needed to be sacrificed so that the Foundation could survive," is one that made me think that the Foundation's hold and strength is something that's going to be even larger now as they look to spread the message of the Foundation. The others seldom believed that the first Foundation would be no more, hence the need for a second, so it will be interesting to see what consequences that causes. The future can now be changed by actions in the present, which is a massive revelation, and it will impact the show in Season 3. There are many different directions that the show could go in when it does return, and personally, I can't wait to see which direction it chooses. If the story is anything like what we were given in this season of the show, then I think we're in for a good ride. The cast. The cast are what make this show so great and help keep us engaged because they're so fleshed out and they go beyond what we see on screen. In terms of the characters, there were actually quite a few deaths that occurred in this season of the show. However, some of them do have the option to come back due to the fact that they can just be decanted. In terms of who won't be returning, with Bel Rios and Hober Mallow succumbing to the explosion of the ship, I think it's safe to say that they won't be returning again. I would also say that Enjoyna Rue's time is done in the show, seeing as though Demerzel decided to make quick work of that, and considering Salvor died at the hands of Josiah and he was also killed too, they both won't be returning, along with Tellum. So in terms of who will be returning, the characters that I think we'll be seeing again are Harry Seldon, Gaal, Demerzel, Brother Day, Dusk, and Dawn. We could potentially see Queen Sareth and the Dawn that escaped depending on if they find a way to still be around in 152 years' time. We could also see Brother Constant, Polly Verisov, Seth Cermak, the Mule, and whoever it was that the Mule was speaking to when it came to that scene just before the end credits. I also imagine that we'll be introduced to many other new characters as well. Considering that we're going to be 150 years in the future, there's so many things that could have changed. Plus, I feel there'll be a whole new bunch of Mentalics that we'll come to see when the show does return. Unfortunately for now, that's all that's known about Season 3 of Foundation. I'm sure more information will be released as time goes on. So, there you have it. Foundation Season 3, everything we know. What do you think will happen next? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.